Nam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Michael. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, likewise. So we have a few topics on the agenda today, and we'll start out pretty much on a simple topic. I've seen back in February this year that Dubai actually banned privacy coins, like Monero, presumably Zcash, and other privacy coins. Um, Expand a little bit on that and just the all-round attack on Monero.
Yeah, so that came out earlier this year. And as you know, like late November, we launched the Monero meetups. So that lasted that didn't last very long. November to, I guess, Jan, Feb, whenever the news came out. And so we did one, and we're not obviously not going to do any more. It does feel constrictive to have to have these types of laws being brought in place, and I don't think this is the only country or jurisdiction that's going to do that. So it started off here, but I think Monero is going to have a rocky road in other places as well. Other than that, I mean, other than privacy coins, everything else seems to be pretty well accepted. Other types of crypto, but of course, um, when we talk about digital cash, then I guess this is in preamble to what you mentioned earlier while we were chatting, that they are planning to do a digital version of the currency here, the dirham. So if that's in the works, then they don't want competition to it. And yeah, I think it's natural. It's a regulatory sort of oversight, and I guess being proactive about not wanting competition for your national currency when you're going to bring a digital version in. Yeah. So I think this is something that we're going to see not just here, but in other places as well. Maybe it's starting out here, but as you said, Dubai tends to be sort of the first in a lot of and just taking on the new aspects of crypto. So I guess this banning part of it is also going to start off here, and then we'll see it in other places, I'm sure,
Yeah, well,
unfortunately.
at least if they can handle competition, they at least want competition that they control, right? So
Mhm.
there's a
Yeah.
reason why they're banning Monero and not banning Bitcoin. But both still powerful tools. And I think like what's at the base of that is proof of work as a concept. So I know you wanted to talk more about proof of work as a concept. So why is proof of work as a concept for money so important to you?
Proof of work is the method by which digital currencies are essentially decentralized. And the mining process, which is the creation process of that currency, is spread out um, over hopefully, hopefully millions, but at least hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of machines that produce that currency. So you don't have a centralized point of control or a centralized point of failure, um, which you would have in traditional currencies. So obviously, I'm referring to central banks. But in digital currencies, having proof of work is so critical because if you don't have that, all control resides at one node or one point where decisions are taken unilaterally, and they may or may not be in the best interest of all participants of that network or those who utilize that currency. So proof of work is I mean, it's the holy grail of cryptocurrencies, and it's something that has to be protected. Its integrity has to be protected, meaning proof of work should be leading to decentralization in its true sense, and not a sort of cosmetic version of decentralization that some currencies might have. You might be able to call it a decentralized currency, but if most of the decentralization resides in sort of large ASIC farms, as we discussed, like in Bitcoin, then you would just basically control that in terms of shutting it down if you need to, or whatever, or putting regulations on it, and then they are forced to sort of comply, or either or basically behave in a manner that a centralized authority might dictate, which is not desirable for a currency.
So you've been in let's call it crypto as a buzzword for a few years now, right?
Yeah.
So like certainly myself and a lot of people I know, they sort of start in the so-called shit coins, move into Bitcoin, and then for myself, move into more Monero focused after that. So for yourself, like you've obviously, well, presumably you've come from Bitcoin and moved towards Monero, right? So why?
Yeah.
Why did you? What was the flaws in Bitcoin you saw, and what was, or even not even flaws? What was the better technology you saw in Monero?
So, when I started learning about crypto, I learned about Bitcoin. I went through the whole Bitcoin rabbit hole. And in those days, that was early 2020. And I think I started learning about this in Jan. So really the start of the year of 2020, Jan, Feb, March. Bitcoin was not what it is today. It wasn't as known. It wasn't as famous. It was just a cryptocurrency. It was the most highly capitalized cryptocurrency on the crypto exchanges. But what I learned, like why I kind of swerved towards Monero, is because I started to see over time. It wasn't like a day. It wasn't like a one day to the other. Decision
More of a
that
journey.
it was a journey. It took a while. Initially, when I was getting into Bitcoin, I really respected everything that they had achieved, and I started to look into proof of work and things like that. But then I think along, like you said, along the journey, I realized that Bitcoin was progressively getting more and more centralized, and it was getting more and more sort of controlled in many ways. So whether it's the mining side of it and the regulations that are being brought onto mining companies that mine Bitcoin, because largely a lot of mining capacity in Bitcoin is in the hands of companies. Many of them are publicly traded. Some are privately owned, but a lot of them are publicly traded. So when you have a publicly traded company and even a privately owned one, there are certain regulations that regulators will put on, and the companies running those machines are going to be following that. So that reduces the censorship resistant aspect of the currency, and the fact that it's not completely fungible. When I first discovered fungibility, I was drawn to Monero, and when I first started to really understand fungibility, what it meant, that's I think when my journey started moving towards Monero and getting a bit more disconnected from Bitcoin, because I do respect it. I do understand that the initial idea of Bitcoin was for it to be fungible, and it did start out being completely, you did have a publicly visible address, but they weren't associated to people, and they weren't, there wasn't this KYC normalization that we have today. Back in the day. So it did function the way it was meant to or it was initially designed to by its creators. But over time, I started watching how things were evolving, and I think it started moving away from the initial idea. And unless you get into those very complicated coin join operations and get into like very, very complex and expensive sort of anonymization processes, then which your normal Joe is not going to be able to keep up with. It's just a normal guy on the street. It's just going to go above his head like that. So then that's reducing the practicality aspect of it. So then I realized, hey, a currency that has to be easy to use, and it has to function like cash in a digital version in a world where there is no more cash available. What would that be? And then I started going down the Monero rabbit hole. So that's kind of how I got led to that. And I feel like out of all currencies that we have today in the world, in crypto, Monero really does, satisfy all or checks all the boxes that I look for in a good cryptocurrency.
Do you want to just quickly explain what fungibility is for those who are unaware?
Yeah. So fungibility is the concept where every method of payment is equal to every other method of payment. So let's say you have $1, it's equal to what another dollar would buy you. not only would it be equal to what another dollar would buy you, you wouldn't be associated to that dollar if you used it. So, a dollar passes through your wallet and then you spent it somewhere. You're not like, your name's not associated to that dollar that you might have bought some gum with or like a Coke with. So it's, yeah. So money should not be linked to those utilizing money. Obviously, that's one aspect of fungibility. I guess there's so many aspects of fungibility when it comes to crypto and when it comes to the digital utilization. But essentially, what it means is one unit equals another unit. As simple as that. One unit of payment equals another unit. There is absolutely no distinction between the two. Now, in crypto, how does that manifest? It manifests as, 90%, I would say above 90% of crypto currencies have a publicly traceable blockchain where that crypto is not equal to another crypto. Why? Because it may have passed through certain types of wallets, certain people, certain, KYC'd individuals. And this other coin, let's say a Dogecoin, passed through another set of wallets, which gives it a unique, by virtue of where it was used and of where it moved around, it gives it a unique personality. I'm not even sure how to, address these types of issues. But Monero, for example, can pass through any number of wallets, and it's still going to not inherit any of those properties of anybody that held it or transacted with it, So it's essentially one of those things. Like, think of Bitcoin as a sticky thing. It just sticks to your fingers forever and you're never going to be able to get rid of it. It's the super glue of the super glues, and it's stuck on your fingers forever once it passed through your hands. And think of Monero as like that watery thing that you just wipe off and it's gone once you're done using it. So fungibility in a sense is really currency behaving as what it is meant to be, buying you something of a value, utilization. It's utilization in a transaction, and that's it. And there's no association to, any of the parties that transact with that currency.
And what are some of the dangers you see in terms of, so say you own a tainted Bitcoin or tainted Dogecoin or whatever, right? What are some of the potential problems you see with having that complete traceability besides fungibility?
Well, it's that I remember seeing a short video that somebody put out, and there's actually Vic on record saying that imagine there's a large transaction on the darknets. Now that Bitcoin is being traced by the authorities, and all the wallets it's going through are being checked, and then it's frozen, and then let's say it ends up in your wallet, God forbid, and then you try to take it to your exchange and liquidate it for fiat or something, and they confiscate it and say, hey, no, this Bitcoin is tainted and you have been involved in some sort of shady transactions. Now, what do you know? I mean, I am a believer that most of humanity is good, and they're not using it, using their currencies for anything that's, not just that's yeah. I mean, and I'm a believer in freedom. I feel, whoever needs to, while people aren't hurting anybody else, they are free to, they should be ideally free to do what they want and spend their money the way they see fit. Fine, they've earned it. Let them buy alcohol with it, buy whatever they want with it. Fine. What I'm saying is, when you don't have fungibility in a currency and it passes through, unfortunately, like a person's hands, when I say hands, your digital wallet or whatever, and then it's utilized somewhere else, or it goes into, or especially when it goes for an exchange with fiat, then you're facing problems. And it's pretty much a guarantee these days because chain analysis and the analytical companies that are analyzing crypto transactions are extremely detailed, in the information that they go through and they provide. So unless you're like some coin join expert at mixing coins and, making your currency untraceable, which literally there's probably a handful of people in the world who can do that, you're not gonna have the benefits of a cash-like transaction that will, leave, like for good or bad, right? we don't want to be either positively or negatively impacted. We don't want to think about it. When you buy something at the gas station, you want to be done with that and forget about it. Like, you bought a coffee, you're done, you paid for it. You don't want that coffee tracing you back forever, for good or for bad. Usually it's for bad, right? Because if you bought something with uh, celebrities Bitcoin, some celebrity held the Bitcoin before you, nothing's going to happen to you. But if something bad happened to that Bitcoin or through that Bitcoin, then that could, or Dogecoin, or Ethereum, or any currency that you might utilize, then yeah, the potential for something bad coming on to good people, or people who are less. I don't even believe in good people, bad people. I just think something that happened that's not ethical, or violates some sort of regulation, that can then link back to another person who never violated any regulations, then that's kind of not nice. And that's the danger with fungible coins in the crypto
So
space.
why do you think governments and whether it's governments or whether it's not-profit organizations, say like the World Economic Forum, why do you think they hate privacy so much? Why do you think they hate freedom and the freedom to transact as people see fit? Just as a follow-up to that too, you see the recent regulations in America, they've brought out that any purchase over $600 is going to be audited, right? But meanwhile, the Pentagon has failed 5 consecutive audits in a row, and hundreds of billions of dollars have gone missing. So why are they so focused on what the individual is doing from a privacy point of view and a freedom point of view?
Because having financial transactions visible to the authorities is the best way to control people, right?
Why though? Why do they want to control people?
Oh, those are deep questions.
Exactly.
Maybe we should be asking them that, but they do want to control people, because they don't want people to. Honestly, I don't think they want people to save money. They want to prevent savings, because having people gather savings and purchase capital assets that generate cash flow is not what they want. They don't want people empowered. They want people to be dependent on doles and subsidies and government handouts. They want a population of slaves. The more people they can keep in that situation of sort of like a hand-to-mouth monthly existence, you get your paycheck, you spend it all during the month. That's the kind of world they want to see. So if you are somebody who's able to keep like a little handful aside every month, they're coming for that little bag that you put aside every month. They don't want that. They want you spending everything every month. And yeah, I mean, I don't know why they want that, or what their ulterior motives are, but definitely it looks like independence, human freedom, which comes from purchasing and developing and acquiring capital assets, is not a desirable sort of phenomenon.
So what's the fight back? How do we fight back against it?
The fight back is privacy, because what they can't see, they can't censor, right? So
that's true.
Yeah, so that's why gold is so big, right? Gold is completely private, untraceable. I mean, honestly, assets like I saw so many places now people have started talking about how real estate is not even yours anymore, because it's physically you can't move real estate.
Yeah,
it's at
seizable.
A location. It's seizable. So what's unseizable and untraceable? Now it's all gonna be there. Like your freedom's gonna, in the next few decades, is really, in my view, is going to be determined by how much untraceable, unseizable, unconfiscatable wealth you have. That's freedom.
So I suppose, how do you see it playing out? Like, how are people supposed to continually fight back when tougher regulations are passed and people have less access to Monero or Zcash or whatever, right? How does the transition to a so-called Monero standard happen?
It's not going to be easy. Like I said, countries have started banning Monero. I don't know if Australia almost like doesn't even have exchanges that sell Monero,
It's banned on
or
exchanges. Yeah.
it's banned on exchanges in so many
Yeah.
countries already. So when it's banned on exchanges, it's basically as good as being banned, right? So I wouldn't say UAE was the first country to do it. Like other countries have banned it on exchanges and the purchase of it and stuff like that. So we're going to see that happen more. I think it's not going to be easy for people to find a way out, but necessity is the mother of, I guess, just another road. New roads and new solutions in life come about when there's necessity. So when I don't see Monero getting adopted, just like a little rosy thing that people start buying, like because its mascot is so cute, like the dog on Dogecoin. That's not going to happen in my view. Monero will get adopted when people really need it and when they realize there's no other way. So it's going to be hard. I think the world is going to become more and more unfree place before that silver lining of freedom sort of becomes more well understood. Nobody knows what, I mean, where I live, crypto is just like, I there's a lot of crypto events happening around here where I live in Dubai, but they're all, I mean, it's a different kind of crypto. I wouldn't even, I'm not even, I would just call it a startup business, a startup that does some fancy thing that somebody thought about. But it's, as far as transacting currencies, digital cash, there's nothing like it. And it'll only become more widespread when there's real necessity, I think.
So I have a friend from Brazil, and probably a year ago, whenever we're talking about how exactly that, necessity is the father of innovation. So we were talking about basically how fiat and how the constant devaluation is going to push people to alternative. I think we're talking about stores of value or monies, or I don't think we're specifically talking about Monero. And I said to him, he was asking, what's really going to push people to this? And I was saying, the devaluation. And I said, well, how many times can people, lose their money and still go back to the same thing? And he said at least 6 times, because in Brazil, they've done that 6 times. They've redenominated the currency 6 times. So the broader sort of question I'm trying to ask is, how do we fight back against that sort of normie propaganda of where they can completely control the narrative and essentially control the thought processes of people, control what people think the problem is and what they think the solution is. Whereas people like us, we obviously believe what the problem is, and Monero is the solution to that. So how do we infiltrate that more normie part, if you will, to fight back against the relentless propaganda that's played by the mainstream media?
So imagine there's somebody who understands currency devaluation. That's not a simple concept to understand as it is. You really got to kind of go into the depths of macroeconomics to sort of get your head around that. But once you do that, the normie will go towards cryptocurrencies just as a digital version of store of value. And then they'll go into the Bitcoin rabbit hole. That's the likely sort of place they'll end up at. They will start to understand a lot of important concepts about money, about the properties of money, about especially the disadvantages of fiat, and the devaluation aspect and everything. Also the traceable aspect of fiat, because any digital transaction is traceable, right? So, but it's not as traceable as a blockchain transaction for a publicly traded, publicly visible blockchain. Anyway, but what I would say is a lot of normies, like you said, would go down that path, and they would get a lot of good information going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. You do have to admit that there are some wonderful teachers and figures, in that space who have done a lot of work in educating the community, or whoever comes in through their investigative minds are coming in and discovering crypto for the first time. So they will go down that path and that journey, and some of them may or may not continue down that path and end up with Monero. But I think eventually when the practical aspect of Bitcoin kicks in, and when someone wants to actually, um, well, actually, yeah, when they go down that Bitcoin rabbit hole, they're looking for a store of value. So the devaluation aspect and the the positive side of Bitcoin is the 21 million limited supply. Although Monero supply is more or less in the same range as Bitcoin, and it will be for a few decades now. But just that stigma, that 21 million, cap supply, that number associated with it, I think it's formed somewhat of this undercurrent subculture that is now sort of widely understood in crypto circles. Monero doesn't have that because the number one FUD that we get is that it's unlimited in quantity, unlimited in supply. It's not as simple as that, obviously, but we don't have that number, that close cap number that says, hey, there's never going to be more than this Monero. No, there is. And the reason that we're going to have a supply that's forever growing, but it's not forever growing at just any rate. It's forever growing at a very, very, very tiny sort of supply annually, is because it has to be, we're substituting for the lost coins, we're substituting for, and we're accounting for the growth in the network and the added participants. So there has to be a small amount of inflation, a deflationary inflation, which Monero has. But yeah, so again, coming back to the point where a normie's journey would definitely take them to, as they come into crypto, they would probably end up with Bitcoin. Maybe they have a positive experience or not with shit coins. That is an optional step, I guess, in the process. But they would usually end up at Bitcoin. And then if they have the curiosity to go further and understand aspects of fungibility, then they'd probably start hearing about Monero.
So we talked about, obviously, necessity is what's going to push people into Monero and alternative monies, if you will.
Yeah.
So CBDCs, social credit scores, digital IDs are a pretty worrying technologies that are coming about they're certainly coming along at a fast pace in a lot of westernized countries. But what time frame do you put on these technologies being implemented on a broad sort of scale? And then as a supplementary question, what time frame do you put on the adoption to whether that's Bitcoin, Monero, or just alternative monies as a sort of mainstream ideology?
I would say the time frame for both would be parallel, and I see that happening in the next 3 to 5 years. Yeah, approximately.
Interesting. Yeah, I think CBDCs will come out. I think it'll take a bit longer for digital IDs are already coming out. They've got these government apps where you link all your services and can have your driver's license and all these kind of things together. Even here in Australia. Social credit scores, I think, are probably going to take a little bit longer. But it'll be interesting to see. I think we have to have that period of people have to actually realize what they have signed up for, so to say, or they haven't signed up for it. They've been forced into it before they actually realize each event and each thing that happens along the way is just going to increase the probability of pushing people into alternative monies, namely Monero, if you will, privacy preserving money. Nam, thanks so much for coming on. We've pretty much expired all of our time here, so I really appreciate your time. And we'll have to get you back on sometime. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It was great.